Good morning, members. Councillor Bremner.
Yep, hi Michelle, I'm here. Morning.
Councillor Donny Mackay. No. Councillor Willie Mackay, here. Councillor Mackey. Councillor Mackey.
I've just had a message from Struan to say he's struggling to get on. He's having IT problems this morning. Hopefully not too far away.
Okay. Councillor Reese.
Yes, present. Good morning, Anne.
Councillor Rossi.
Morning, everyone. Present.
Councillor Sinclair.
Present, yeah.
And Councillor Tilt.
Present here, yes, thank you.
Okay, Anne, well done. Thank you very much for that, members. As you know, I'm here to conduct item agenda number one. Great pleasure to be here on this somewhat historic day as we're about to choose, hopefully, a chair for the Caithness Area Committee. So what I'm going to do now is ask for nominations for the post of chair of the Caithness Committee. So if you want to raise your hand, fair enough. If not, I'll cut you through the audio. Okay, Carl, I see your hand up first. If you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Willie. I would like to propose Councillor Bremner as our chair. I would seek a seconder, and I'm happy to give a rationale for my proposal if anyone wants to hear it. Thank you, Willie.
Thank you for that, Carl. Yes, okay. Have we got a seconder for that proposal by Carl? We've got a seconder. I don't see any hands up.
Chair, I've just seen a message from Councillor Mackey, but it disappeared before I could read it. I think he might be trying to get in.
It says apologies for being late, IT issues today.
Okay, we got a seconder again for Councillor Bremner. Is everybody linked in there? I don't see any hands up. Any other technical issues anybody experiencing? Okay, right. I'll second Councillor Raymond Bremner myself. Okay. William Mackay. Okay, any other nominations for the post of chair of the Caithness Area Committee?
Sorry, Chair, Andrew had his hand up there.
Okay, Andrew, where are you?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Struan Mackey, please.
Struan Mackey, okay. Have we got a seconder for Andrew's proposal? Any seconders for Andrew's proposal, which is for Struan Mackey? Matthew, I see your hand up.
I'll second Struan, please, Chair.
Okay, any further nominations for the post of chair of the area committee? Right, so far we have got Councillor Raymond Bremner, proposed by Carl Rossi and seconded by myself. We have got Struan Mackey, proposed by Andrew Sinclair, seconded by Matthew Reese. So we have one member left. Jill, are you there, Jill?
Yeah, I'm here.
Jill, all 6 of us have spoken. There's only 7 of us here. Would you like to cast your vote as to who you would like the chair? We've got Raymond, proposed by Carl and seconded by myself. We've got Struan, proposed by Andrew and seconded by Matthew, would you like to say who you'd like to take the position?
I'd like Raymond, please.
Raymond, okay. Well, members, all 7 of us have spoken now. So, Raymond.
Willie, sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to give you a dreaded point of order here. Is it appropriate when we don't have Struan online? I mean, I don't know. Does Struan want? Is he prepared to accept the nomination? Is it appropriate?
Well, I think it is really. I think it is.
Hi, Carl. I've been on since 1 minute past. I just couldn't. I couldn't join on time because of Teams. So my apologies.
Yeah, well, Struan is here. I think it is appropriate, really. He put his name forward. But however, the situation is that Raymond has been proposed by Carl, Rossi, and seconded by myself, and Jill has voted in favour of Raymond. All 7 of us have spoken. So, Raymond, congratulations. You are the new chair of the Caithness Area Committee.
I hate to say this, Willie, but I'm going to. Would you mind if you continue just now? I'll try and be back as quickly as I possibly can.
You are accepting the position as chair?
Yes, I'll accept the position as chair.
Any other comments before we move on with the agenda? Right, let's crack on in the absence of the chair who's offering an emergency phone call. Any apologies for absence, members? No apologies.
I haven't received any, Chair.
Okay, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, members? I can't see your hands coming up, so just get straight into it. No?
Yeah.
Declarations? Yes,
Well,
Carl?
I'm not entirely sure, but look, I'll just inform you. I am a member of the steering group for the Flow Country and their desire to become a World Heritage Site. So that's one of the agenda items. But there is a non-financial interest, I guess, but pretty sure you'll know that I'll be supporting the field. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for that. Okay, the minutes, members, the minutes. Who else is coming in there?
It's me, Willie. It's
Hey,
Jill. Yeah, I have a daughter-in-law that works at Miller Academy and a grandson at Holkirk Primary School. Don't know whether that's relevant or not.
Okay, Jill, well, that will be noted. Thank you for that. Okay, members, agenda item number 4, the minutes circulated for noting the 12th of August, which were approved by the council on the 9th of September. Okay, members, with that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Item number 5, March Horizon Action Tracker. Where is the action tracker? I can't see it from here. Well, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that if we have to. Okay, let's move on in the item number 6, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Local Performance Report. Paddy, are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Welcome, Paddy. Welcome indeed to the Caithness Area Committee. Great pleasure to see you here. If you want to go into your report and talk to it, and if members have any questions, just raise your hands and we shall conduct that. Okay, Paddy, off you go.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, elected members. I'm Station Commander Paddy Farrell. I'm the new District Officer for Caithness, and I'm here this morning to deliver the SFRS performance report to the Caithness Area Committee on behalf of the local Senior Officer for Highland. First of all, could I please direct your attention to the, for the cover letter, if I could direct your attention to 3.2. Excuse me. Home fire safety visits are still being carried out within the district by RDS staff and community safety advocates. This was being carried out throughout lockdown. However, now that lockdown restrictions are easing, we're now in a position where we're able to carry out a broad range of more home safety visits to a more broad range of people. Previously, it was to high and very high risk rated people, and now we're able to offer them back to everyone again. Our COVID staff throughout the district are supporting COVID testing in Caithness 7 days per week here at Thurso Fire Station. We also have staff supporting our partners in the Scottish Ambulance Service by driving ambulances to assist the ambulance service cover for driver shortages. The service has recently conducted a public consultation on how it will respond to unwanted fire alarm signal incidents. This data is now being analysed and will be used to inform how the service responds to automatic fire alarm incidents in certain properties. It is envisaged that this approach will free up resources which can be dedicated to other activities such as training, community safety engagements and dealing with other incidents. Although COVID-19 has impacted on our ability to deliver engagement activities, we have and will continue to adapt our approach, such as greater use of social media and to engage with local communities and spread community safety and fire safety advice. But we will also be engaging with community members and partner agencies off station. So at the same time, we're still engaging with the local community to deliver community safety advice and activities, but at the same time we're still trying to protect our frontline staff and our frontline resources. If I could move on to section 3.3 of the letter, we have, with regards to deliberate fires, accidental dwelling fires, fire fatalities and fire casualties, figures remain reassuringly low and consistent with previous years. Road traffic collisions have seen a slight increase in August, however they remain low in the Caithness area in comparison to the Highland total. Despite these figures, we will continue our engagement activities and will continue to ensure that we try to reduce these numbers even more. If I could move to section 3.4. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is, on the subject of recruitment, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is introducing a pre-employment engagement programme, otherwise known as a PEEP, which is one of the areas where it's being trialled in is Highland North. The aim of this programme is to support applicants who wish to join us, particularly as retained duty system firefighters, to support these applicants through the recruitment process, with more emphasis being placed upon assessments being carried out locally, and also the recruitment process being taken place in a much shorter time frame. This is feedback that we've taken on board from previous applicants, and so that's feedback that we've taken on board, and now we're now putting that in place, taking that feedback on board and putting measures in place to act on it. Key stations and communities, we have promoted campaigns with partner agencies, and as always, our recruitment avenues are always open via My Job Scotland. In particular, we would welcome applications in the Caithness area for Dunbeath, John O'Groats and Leibster community fire stations. Chair and elected members, that's really I've covered sort of the cover letter for the report. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any at this time.
Yeah, well done, Paddy. Thank you very much. It's nice to see you here. How are you settling into Thurso? Are you quite happy up here in the far north?
Yes, I have. I've moved up lock, stock and barrel, so I'm based in Thurso. So I'm enjoying it. I was quite lucky to move up just before the summer, so I got the benefit of an absolutely beautiful summer, and just getting to know the area and enjoying the scenery. Absolutely beautiful scenery. Well
done, Paddy. Well done. Okay, members, any questions for Paddy here at this item? Any hands going up? Yes, we've got Matthew. Okay, Matthew, Councillor Reese, if you'd like to.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Welcome also, Paddy, from me to Caithness. Paddy, just really, I suppose you'll be aware of the motion we had at Council last week. I really just wanted to ask a really simple question. You know, what, if anything, is it that we can do to help with the recruitment? The 3 stations you mentioned, I should say, are not in my ward. They're in Ward 3 down the East Coast. So it's not my patch, but there's a bigger general principle here because, as you're aware, Your colleagues at Thurso are on occasion covering out along the north coast if Betty Hill are off the run. So it is a relevant discussion for both wards, I think, in the county. And I just be interested to get your thoughts on what can be done to attract more people to the fire and rescue service. I mean, the sort of things I think that have just been mentioned before are, it is quite a big ask of employers to let someone go for 2 weeks initially, and then for another period to do the breathing apparatus course. And obviously we all understand that, and it's incredible that many employers are willing to let people go, because there's nothing much more important than the Treble 9 services. But be interested to know if there's anything we can do to help you attract more people to such an important role. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reese. I think I understand completely where you're coming from. The point, it is a big commitment with regards to training period, but especially the initial basic training, it needs to be that way. In terms of that 2 week initial 2 week task and task management course, it is very intensive, and it is a very intensive course, especially with the breathing apparatus phase that comes along after that. With regards encouraging people to come forward, we have carried out a number of open evenings recently in Betty Hill and Tongue, which did generate some interest. However, we can always encourage more, and if there's any greater appetite, or if there's a desire for more open events and open engagement events in these areas, and of course we will always have more. Really, I think I think it is more around sort of encouraging people to come forward, people who may be interested in joining us and providing a service to the local community. Maybe even if they're not dead set on joining, but if they're interested, if they are sort of looking at the fire service and thinking, that could maybe be for them, encouraging them to come forward. If you do know anybody in your constituencies who may, or in your wards who may be interested in joining them, encourage them to come forward. Either give them my contact details. I'd be more than happy to speak to anybody for any advice that they may be willing to, that may encourage them to submit an application. And also anybody who maybe that you may know of in the past who would have wanted to apply for the fire service, who maybe had applied, but for whatever reason maybe were unsuccessful in the recruitment process. Like I say, we do have the pre-employment engagement programme now, which is being rolled out or trialled in Highland North. Anybody who would come forward now and submit an application, they would be able to benefit from that program. So it would be a much shorter program, and they'll be supported and mentored through the process at a much more local level as well. So there, previously applicants would have had to have gone to maybe Invergordon for their practical selection test. That can all now be done locally. So I think, like I say, we're reaching out to the communities and engaging. And we will continue to do so. So, but I think just the more getting the word out, just to encourage people who maybe would have thought previously about it, or anybody who now who would be thinking about it or considering it, encourage them just to come forward and ask. And also any employers as well who maybe have any staff who are, I know it is a big ask, and I do appreciate that, but any employers who maybe, if they could consider releasing their staff, any staff who maybe or are keen to join or wanting to join, if any employers who may be keen to or if they could consider releasing their staff. Like I say, we do understand it is a big ask, but it is like I said, it is an important community service that they're providing.
Yeah, thank you, Paddy. Just one further question, Chair, for me, just very briefly. It's just really to, if there were employers listening just now or people thinking about joining, just to confirm, Paddy, my understanding is correct. It's a 2 week initial course and a 2 week BA course, which ideally is within 6 months of joining. That's roughly what the ask is.
Yes, that's correct. There is other training we do, which is ongoing road traffic collision training, but that's usually carried out at weekends, and first aid training as well. Those are sort of the two big asks, and we do understand it is a big commitment, and but unfortunately the training does need to be like that, just because it is such a safety critical subject. So yes, that is correct. It is the 2 week initial task and task management, and then a 2 week BA course, and then each week there is a requirement for each firefighter to attend a 2.5 hour drill session, which is in the evening times, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, depending on the station.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done, Matthew. Thank you, Paddy, for that. We're going to move now to Councillor Carl Rossi. He's got a question.
Morning, Paddy, and thanks for your report and welcome to Caithness. Good to hear an Irish accent up in Caithness. So, it's quite interesting listening to your report. You know, for me, you're doing all the right things. You speak about community engagement. You're acting on feedback. You know, to better identify how you can achieve your aims in recruitment. Just thinking about comments with employers, and I absolutely understand, you know, it is a big commitment, but I'm just wondering, often think what we can possibly do as councillors, and we on a monthly basis, we consider how we recognise local achievements. There's maybe something for us to consider there and recognising existing employers that do accommodate, you know, in terms of firefighters. So we can maybe have a think about, Willie, and make a note to discuss that at some future point. So yeah, always glad to help, Paddy. I don't have too many other points, but as always, I appreciate getting a report from yourself. So I hope you enjoy your stay in Caithness. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Carl. Paddy, for myself, there was great concern recently over this new compulsory interlinked fire alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. Homeowners, I believe, on low income can get assistance to do this. There was a great worry about the cost involved, hiring electricians, etc. But I do see now that the DIY enthusiasts can get alarms to fit together themselves. I know your opinion must be that it must be compulsory this now with houses, but are you getting a great response to this yourself throughout the area? And is the work being undertaken? Do you have any experience of this new interlinked fire alarms, which every household should have, and how insurance companies are or would be taking a look at this if the process wasn't undertaken?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we have had quite a bit of interest in the local area, in the Caithness area, certainly, with regards to the implementation of these smoke alarms. There's different ways in which they can be done, in which they can be fitted. There are Bluetooth alarms which can speak to each other, which can be fitted, with minimal sort of disruption, if you like, or minimum work being done in a property. But we have had a considerable amount of interest in the Caithness area, and we do have our community safety advocates who would routinely go out and speak to people in the course of home fire safety visits, and that might be one thing that they would pick up on. In terms of insurance companies, I honestly don't know how insurance companies would view it, or how they're viewing the subject. It's something that I couldn't really comment on, but certainly in the area there has been a great deal of interest, even other partner organisations referring people to us and asking us to get in touch with individuals with regard to their alarms.
Thanks, Paddy. Yes, you did at one course offer free fire alarms and free tests. So that is out now. I presume your alarms, the free ones, wouldn't be up to the standard required, would it, nowadays?
We are, in certain circumstances. It would depend on the individual circumstances. We can provide the new interlinked alarms. But it would depend on the individual circumstances themselves. But of course, in an interim solution, we do have standalone battery powered smoke alarms, which we would fit in properties in the course of a home safety visit. But in certain circumstances, we are able to provide the new interlinked alarms.
Very good. Thank you very much for that, Paddy. Very good. All in the interest of safety and very much required indeed. Members, any more questions for Paddy on his first visit to our area committee? Any more questions or comments, members? Don't see any hands up. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Paddy. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your reports. Very welcome indeed. And we look forward to seeing you in due course.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you, members and Chair and members, for being so welcoming and making me feel so welcome in the area. I'd also like to just thank yourselves for your continued support, not only for myself being new to the area, but just to the organisation as a whole. Councillor Rossi, I very much appreciate the comment you raised about employers. And just again, thank you for your support. And I'd also like to thank any employers who maybe if you're listening to the meeting this morning, thank you for your support in releasing your staff, and anybody who may be listening, if you could consider doing so, be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paddy, and we'll see you around, and hope you enjoy Caithness. I moved up here 52 years ago myself, so I'm more or less a local now. Well done, Paddy. Okay, members, thank you. Let's move on. Let's go back to the action tracker. Actually, I've got a copy here. Thank you for sending it up to me. The action tracker, members, which we had here, as you can see, if you've got it on your papers, from the 22nd of October, agenda item number 6 was to continue to support the refurbishment of Thurso Fire Station, updated. Struan Mackey to write to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, action point to Struan. Struan, how did you get on? Did you get involved in that one?
Hi, Willie. Yep, that was done, I think, the day after the last committee that went out. So my understanding is that's closed. I think based on the discussions that we've had with Scottish Fire and Rescue Service after that, I believe we've kind of exhausted what we can do from a member's perspective.
Well done, Struan, well done. Okay, looking down the tracker here, actions from the meeting of April, all the way back. You can read it there, disabled access provision, road safety, area Thurso High School, all of us. No update on that. Wickham and Good, there's no update on that one. Ward 2 and 3 members to meet 7 to review the list of road structural maintenance and their wards and the allocation of 100,000 per ward. There's no update on that, but I think there is in other areas. But we'll keep note of that as we move on now. Let's go to item number 7, the Thurso Associated School Group.
Excuse me, Wally. Sorry.
We've got? Yeah, come in, Carl.
Sorry, Wally, I've got my hand out. You just didn't see it.
No, yeah, I don't see it actually.
Yeah, would it be possible to get a wee bit of an update from Struan in regard to matter of the fire station? I know we've had it on the agenda for a long time, but I would be interested to know what the background. I haven't been briefed. Apologies if everyone else has been briefed, Struan, but I've been out of the picture a wee bit recently. And just, I don't have the action tracker in front of me. Well, I'm presuming the Thurso High School one relates to transport drop-off area, is it? Again, I'm just
yeah, it looks like it. Okay,
we can maybe chat about that in the next item. But Struan, if you don't mind, it'd be useful to understand where we are. Thanks.
No problem, Carl. So, Chair or interim Chair, are you happy for me to just give a couple of minutes here?
Yeah, sure. You go ahead, Struan.
Thanks, Willie. So, members may or may not remember, but we've had an outstanding kind of query with Scottish Fire and Rescue Service about really the condition and the overall appropriateness of the Thurso Fire Station. This is something that Donny had raised a number of times. For example, some of the facilities being suitable for bringing in both male and female folk into the service. And I think there was a legacy issue around about the fact that it was obviously built for a particular time period. Donny had wanted to see action because I think it had been raised at multiple meetings, and we thought the best way to try and get any sort of action was by writing directly to Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, effectively outlining what their plans, Carl, was for the facility, and seeing if it was part of any renewal refurbishment programme kind of going forward. Now, what the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have intimated to me is that they've got a programme of works at the moment. Thurso is not near the top of that list, as I'm sure we can understand. It's a national service, and if you go across Scotland, I'm sure a number of their stations are in desperate need of renewal and refurbishment. We're not quite at the top of that process as it currently stands, but that they would keep us abreast as and when any improvements would be made to the building itself. Now, I believe this actually came in via Alex McManus. So I'll go and see if I've got a copy of it, Carl, and send it to the Caithness members. But I know that we closed out the action. I'm not necessarily sure if we got what we were looking for from it, but we did close out the action by asking the question.
Thanks for that, Struan. Carl, are you okay with that?
Yeah, sorry, if you just, Struan, sorry, probably, this, but from memory, we remember during the review process for health and social care, there were some discussions about whether it would be integrated in I'm seeing you nodded, so integrated fire service into healthcare hub. They thought, and there was good rationale for it. Is that still on the agenda, or just again?
So it was intimated in the letter, Carl, that the Fire and Rescue Service are continually liaising with different groups, including the NHS. So, although our focus has been trying to get as good a quality station as we can in the centre of the town, it was acknowledged that there had been the discussions about having that integrated service. So I think that's been discussed in the round. So although it may be a little bit further down the line, I think from our perspective, we know that from a organisational perspective, let's just say, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are aware that Caithness members are just wanting to know what the kind of future trajectory is, and I would make the argument that if it does raise its head again through that kind of integrated pathway, we'll find out that way as well as finding out through the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. So I do agree, yeah.
Well done. You okay, Carl? Yeah, thanks for that,
Thanks,
Struan.
Roy, thanks for that.
Councillor
well
Mackay,
done.
Councillor
Yeah,
Mackay,
sure.
it's Margaret Ross. I've just had a message from Councillor Bremner. He's asked me to let you know that he's found his dad to have had what he suspects is a stroke. He's waiting on the ambulance coming, and he'll be back to join us as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you, Margaret from Housing. I just received a text message from Raymond too on the distressing circumstances there. I hope he's all well. I sent him a message to say, take care of your dad first. Don't worry about the meeting here. We will keep things going. So
Well, his
thanks for that,
message to
Margaret.
say
Yes.
to let you know that he'll be back as soon as possible.
Right, thanks, Margaret. Thank you for that. Okay. Right, members, we will continue. Just looking at the action tracker here, Carl, it's Thurso High School, item number 10, the road structural maintenance had been actioned. And item number 12, the Wick Common Good was ongoing. In addition, it was confirmed that a meeting between members and the Common Good Fund officer was to be held in the near future. Right, that's the action tracker. Let's move the screens around now to the agenda. And I see an agenda item number 7 is the Thurso Associated School Group. Okay, who we got to talk to this today, Mark?
Good morning, Chair. It's Alison Donald here, and Hannah's here.
Thank you very much, Alison. You go ahead. Thank you. Nice to see you.
And you too. So good morning, members. You've had the Thurso report. Can I apologise in a way for not starting the system that we talked about, or I know Nikki had spoken to you about at the last committee, which was just sharing with you a way that we would try and get councillors within schools. We really do intend to move forward with that, but as a pilot in the Caithness area. But just now, with our position statement with COVID, we only have 1 or 2 people who are visiting in schools, so we just felt this is not the right time to start it. But it's not to say that's not going to happen in the future. Hopefully by the end of the year, the spring, hopefully we'll be able to do that. So Hannah and I are here to talk to the report that you received, which is the usual format for the time being. I'd like to bring to your attention the exclusion rates. I thought all the numbers were fairly clear there, other than the exclusion rates stood out to me, particularly Castletown, Falkirk and Miller. They're above the Highland rates. This was in 2018-19. Having spoken to the head teachers, I know these exclusions were for individuals within each school who had issues with social emotional difficulties, and they maybe needed some time to help them because they would be quite violent towards other members of staff or children, or members of staff or children. Support was put in place for these, and I know that the exclusion rates have been reducing since then, which is a good thing. The fact that that's 2018-19 means there's been a couple of years since then. An update on nursery. We're now providing 1140 in all the Thurso area, in fact the whole of Caithness area. Thurso was the last to come on board there. Miller Academy Nursery new build has now been opened and I believe is looking fantastic. I'm going to have a visit next Wednesday. And the new build in Ray should be completed by the 7th of November, which means that we've, you know, we're fine with that. It's Cala who will be running the nursery setting in Ray. A short update on COVID. A number of individual positive cases are being noted within schools throughout the Thurso, in fact throughout the Caithness Highland area. However, what we do now is we follow a protocol where the head teacher sends a warn and inform letter to parents if there's one case in a class, maybe even 2 cases in a class. And then if there's more than 2 cases, they get in touch with the health protection team and they come on board and give guidance. So at the moment, since we've come back after the October holiday, there's been quite a few individual cases, but we have one significant outbreak in Mount Pleasant Primary, where as of yesterday there were 15 positives in primary 6. So the 23 children, and there are 4 members of staff, they are self-isolating for 10 days. Virtual learning is being provided for those who are well enough to engage with it. That's all I had to say about the report. I think Hannah, would you like to come in and give an update on Thurso High, please?
Yeah, good morning, Chair and members. I was just going to talk a little bit about general life in Thurso High School with some reference to some of the figures, but as you appreciate, some of them are older now, so feel that, you know, we're sort of 2 years on from some of the data. But obviously, if you want to ask any further questions around those figures at the end, that's fine. So after a slightly unsettled start for a few of our pupils on return in August, a lot of hard work from senior management and guidance mean that things have settled down and learning life in Thurso High School is proceeding relatively smoothly. A few of the younger pupils seem to be much more affected by the difficulties of the past 2 years, while the seniors have been excellent and taken challenges in their stride. When we consider that our first year pupils haven't had a full year in school since primary 5, this is possibly understandable. So while the rest of the outside world returns to relative normality, we're still working with full restrictions, you know, the one-way system, staggered breaks and lunch times, hand sanitizing, no large gatherings and face coverings at all times. So these restrictions are borne pretty stoically by all staff and pupils. Pupils have been excellent in complying with all the procedures, but the lack of any of the social activities, particularly for the older pupils, is very difficult. And they're starting to feel a bit miserable about some things. Some after-school clubs are recommencing though, so as well as after-school study classes, which is good. COVID cases, as Alison touched on in the school, have risen since the holidays, the October holidays, and we now also have staff absent. This puts a great deal of pressure on all who have to cover these absences. We only have 1 supply teacher available for 2 days a week at the moment, and this is really not sufficient at times. This puts a great deal of strain on everybody. Just to reflect back on the SQA situation last session, just to let you know that all of the SQA appeals that were submitted by pupils, of all of these, no grades were changed by the SQA. They were all the grades were upheld. So this is a welcome recognition for staff of the many hours spent assessing, marking, moderating before these were submitted. It was a difficult term. It was a huge amount of work. We've recently been informed of our learning support reductions. We've had our ASN teachers have been reduced from 2.3 full-time equivalents to 2, and our PSA hours have been reduced from 357 to 310. This is obviously a concern going forward and how we'll continue to support all the pupils who need it. We have 17 pupils at staged intervention level 4 and 43 at level 3. So we have a reasonable number of pupils requiring significant support. Our buildings, although our premises are categorised at grade C, Thurso High School, we feel is a pleasant building to be in. We do need to keep it in good repair, however, and there is work to be done in a few areas, including the classrooms at the back of the extension that we've been trying to action for a good while. We also have some concerns over the sinkhole on the playing fields that was recently filled in. The flooding on the road above that sinkhole has been significant with the recent rainfall. Despite the difficulties of our situation in our school, we're trying hard to keep working on staff CPD, professional development, with teaching and learning and classroom behaviour our main focus as before, as well as pupil support. So part of this, we've had a recent focus on developing effective study skills for pupils. And one of our teachers has developed a planned set of lessons for delivery in PSE, and parents will also be offered sessions on how to support pupils with revision, and teachers will be reinforcing these skills for effective learning in classes. This academic session, we've also had a DYW, Developing the Young Workforce Coordinator, appointed for Thurso High School through the Invest in Youth group. So this has been excellent. They meet with us on a weekly basis to review all the DYW projects and priorities, and we have various events in the DYW calendar. In addition to these events, Claire, she's called, has been in contact with local employers about potential work experience opportunities, trying to return to some sort of work experience offering for our pupils, which obviously it wasn't that great to start with. And then obviously with COVID, we're down to literally no work experience opportunities at all. So she's trying to restore some of those. We've also recently had a very positive meeting with Doonray with regard to what they can offer in the way of work experience. And at our suggestion, to offer some mentoring of pupils, not only for the more obvious career paths when you think of Doonray, such as engineering apprenticeships, but for the many other roles within the establishment that may be accessible to many other pupils. This term, we're also undertaking an anti-bullying campaign in the school to support our pupils. All first to third year pupils will be getting lessons in PSE, which look at building respect and empathy for each other, as well as strategies to tackle bullying, especially online, a lot of which takes place out of school and is very difficult for the school to have any control over. We can only offer advice and support for pupils and parents. So to support this work, parents will also receive anti-bullying toolkit, which has got information and advice on supporting your children. That's really all I have to say. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Thank you, Alison and Hannah, for that comprehensive report indeed. Members, have we got questions? Am I seeing any? Yes, I'm seeing Councillor Rossi. Councillor Rossi, go ahead.
Good morning, ladies, and thank you for your reports. There's a lot to celebrate there, and there's quite a few concerns too. So it's fantastic news about nursery new builds coming online soon, and we look forward to that. And the you touched on developing a young workforce, Hannah, so vitally important. Really concerned when you gave the you spoke about first year pupils not having had a full year since primary 5. It really strikes you just where we are and what we need to consider. You think, gee, that was really thought provoking, Hannah. ESN reductions, if we can. I've got to confess I wasn't aware of that. I thought that was a discussion that was further down the road, so it's a drop off on my part. But we can maybe get some more information from you. It does not seem wise, given for the last point, about you're going to have pupils who are clearly disadvantaged from, pupils with similar. Attending Thurso High School in the past, so yeah, it really is a concern. You touched on, when I was looking at a reporting, when I read a report, there's a section where it has eco school, and it's just blanked out. Now, I'm presuming, you can maybe give me a definition of what an eco school is, but I'm presuming it's the type of build it is, and the functionality of an environmentally friendly school. I don't see any nods. If I'm wrong, Alison, you can maybe shake your head or nod. But it always strikes me, and it's when you then go on to highlight the issues that you've got, Hannah. We spoke about school condition in the classrooms. We've got a sinkhole appearing in Playfield. I would be keen to understand. We touched on the action tracker. We've had a long-standing issue with transport drop-off areas. To my frustration, and I'm sure everyone else's frustration. So, as far as I'm aware, I don't think we've got a solution for you there. Again, it frustrates me. So, it'd be interesting to get some more information on that. But just going back to eco schools, I think it was the last last era committee with a report about WIC schools. And we understand that each of them have been replaced, brand new schools, and I'm going to presume that they are very environmentally friendly. But my point is this, and I've made this several times to my ward colleagues. We were at a very early stage in our tenure as councillors. The debate was cut off about Thurso High School. Now, whether a building is, there's no doubt it's got a fondness in people's hearts. And generally, when you speak about the school estate across the ward, people have got a fondness for various primary schools. But I do think that we should have a debate of some kind just about our estate. What do we need to do? We already understand that there are severe drop-offs. So we need to do consultations, cost money, but I think we need to make that part of the debate as we move forward, you know, because things, it's an old building, whatever the condition is, it's going to continue to need maintenance. And to be quite frank, I feel that we've let down Thurso High School and not get an appropriate level of finance and investment for them. So I'll be interested to hear my ward colleagues' thoughts on particularly on those comments, because honestly I do believe that we've let our education colleagues down. So thank you, Hannah and Alison. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl, for that. Alison and Hannah, would you like to comment on Carl's?
Maybe I can come in on the ASN, Carl, and Hannah. I don't know if you want to mention anything further about the school and the car parking. You maybe already have. The ASN budget has been reducing over the last couple of years, since 2019. And the area managers are given a budget each year. This was because of COVID and trying to mitigate issues as we came into the new year. Nikki has left it until October to see if there's, you know, if we could put in as much mitigation as possible against the savings. The area managers were given a budget, and then they looked at the level 3s and 4s within their area. So Roger Banfield would have done that in Sutherland and Caithness, and he gives each ESG a set amount of resource, which they then need to, the head teachers within the ESG, with his guidance, need to decide where that resource goes. So where will the teachers go? Where will the PSAs go? And it is very tight, and you know, Hannah would be correct, well, is correct in saying she has reduced over the last year. I mean, that may be that numbers of 3 and 4 have also reduced. It may be that there's more need in other schools, for instance, some of the primary schools. So that is the difficulty we have with that, is there is only so much of a resource. And so to try and make it as fair as possible, and to try to understand where the difficulties are for individuals, because somebody might have a 3 or a 4 level and they actually don't need a huge amount of support, whereas somebody else might. So that's the understanding underneath working with ESGs, is that, for instance, we're talking about Thurso here, the Thurso ESG head teachers can get together and look at where there is real need within their school and speak together about how they can best meet that need. So yeah, I don't know, Hannah, if you want to add anything there or anything about the building, the car parking area.
Yeah, just with regard to what you said, Alison, just to say that our numbers of 3s and 4s haven't decreased, they have increased, in fact. So we don't have a reduced need at all, nor does any other primary school, and all of the primary schools had a reduction. It wasn't just Thurso High Schools. Obviously, the total budget, as you said, Alison, has been reduced, and we just had to allocate it accordingly. With regard to the school building, the point that Carl raised, I feel strongly that if we maintain the building we've got, we don't have a huge need to have a new build. I mean, WIC, I know that the WIC head teacher has some issues with as many issues with his school as I have with mine, and his is a new build. But it would be really good if we could get some of the repairs action that we've asked for, and not have to take a year or 2 years with considerable effort on my part to get anybody to help us with the repairs. We've been asking for some of the work to be done at the back of the extension, particularly the music rooms, for a considerable period of time, and nothing has happened yet, and it requires myself to continually ask over and over again, which is really time consuming, and in times when a head teacher's time is thinly, very, very thinly stretched indeed. So I would make that point. With regards to the bus park as well, I think we missed the boat on that one, and there's not really much to be done. The situation where we had hoped that we would get access to a little bit of extra ground does not seem to be, that opportunity doesn't seem to be there any longer, despite I know Matthew's tried to support us on that by contacting the developer and so on, and we've also worked quite hard, but hey ho, I think that's just the way it goes. Highland Council had been supportive, and they'd made the plans. We'd had plans drawn up all ready to go, which we understood was what the developer was requiring, but then the goalposts seem to change on us. So a difficult situation. I'm not sure there's much we can do about that. I mean, if we could have some sort of funding to maintain the building we've got, which would obviously be a minuscule amount compared to how much a new build would cost, then I mean, I think we can rumble on quite happily for quite a number of years. So I mean, other things that would be nice would be that our pupils had access to the same sort of facilities as other pupils. However, for example, the sports facilities we have are not good. Our outdoor sports facilities in particular, in the winter, our playing fields aren't accessible because they're so wet. So basically we have a basketball court outside and the running track, and that's it, whereas other schools have access to wonderful all-weather pitches and all sorts of things nearby. So I feel that would be nice if there's some investment could be made in just bringing the school into line in some areas with new builds, but I don't think a new build is necessary, in my opinion, that is.
Thank you for that, Hannah and Alison. Let's move on now to Councillor Matthew Reese. Matthew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning, Hannah. I suppose sometimes these Caithness committees, they suddenly come alive because somebody sort of puts the match to the fuse, and Councillor Rossi has sort of done it. And if we'd been speaking the other way around, I suppose it would have been seen as him arguing with me rather than me probably kind of arguing with him. But this is constructive, because I didn't know obviously what Carl was going to say, but the first thing I wrote down here in capital letters was your words, Hannah. Thurso High School was grade C, and unfortunately we're not talking about listed buildings or anything like that. It is grade C out of the 4 categories the council has for the condition and suitability of the school. And there's such a huge debate here, but I was kind of just listening, and you could boil it down to, do we try and get a new school, or do we try and get some additional support needs staff into the school, or some of the refurbishments that Hannah's just been referring to. And it's not saying it for the point of arguing, but my take on this is, and being part of the council small budget team, we have started having to really seriously consider lots of things we have taken for granted up till now. Members, as you all know, we have 203 schools, plus a couple that are not actually in use, but we've still got them, so we've still got to look after them. We can do a tiny number of new schools each year. So we have started looking just in the last few weeks, almost just informally, at whether or not serious refurbishments are a cheaper way forward than complete new builds, much as we would all like a new build, and I completely understand that. But I'm going to go a bit further. I actually think the condition of Thurso High School, and I really mean this from the schools I've been in, it is a great example to pretty much anywhere else in the Highland Council area of how senior staff plus the janitorial team and others have consistently over decades looked after a very important asset. And I don't claim to be a kind of green expert, but one of the things we've touched on in these budget meetings is looking at the actual environmental costs of demolishing buildings and then doing complete rebuilds, and then compare that to existing buildings and refurbishing them. And I think, Hannah, just along the road opposite at North Highland College, that building got an extensive makeover, whatever it was, 20 years ago. A, it was transformed into quite an attractive building, and B, I believe it's much more fuel efficient now as a result of that. And so I just think, you know, being realistic, I mean, Thurso High is not even on the sort of advanced list for replacement. It's just not there. And every time I walk into that foyer and reception area and see that polished slate floor and the clean windows and just the sort of the good feel and ambience about the school, I just think it's a huge credit to everybody who's responsible for looking after it. And yes, there are things like a perimeter fence that we've talked about before that I remain quite concerned about. And to be blunt, even if it just stops the dog walkers, a minority of them, leaving unmentionable objects on the grass, that would be a start. So those are really my thoughts. I had one much smaller detail, but it's actually also on the environmental theme, Hannah. I believe that some of the trees that were planted around the perimeter may, I use the word may carefully, may have mysteriously transplanted themselves into other gardens in the town and have disappeared. I'd like to have a bit more on that. And if some of the trees have gone, do we give up, or is there an intention to hopefully try it again and replant more of them? I think that's really all my thoughts. Yes, going back to the beginning, the school is grade C, which is a low grade on the face of it. But I think for those who've never been into the school, if they went into it, they might be pleasantly surprised. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Any comments, Alison and Hannah, on Matthew's? Quite happy.
I think Hannah can comment on the trees because I don't know anything about the trees. But can I just say I have already, Matthew, you had emailed before, and I spoke to States. I will yet again send an email to States, and we'll see if we can get something done with the state of the playground in particular, or the grounds roundabout and the perimeter fence.
Thank you.
Okay,
I should have, sorry, Hannah, before you come in, I should have just said it. I agree with what you were saying. Carl actually did more of the work than I did, and probably regarding the car parking area. But to be completely blunt, maybe it has to be on record, but the last 2 emails I've sent to the agent, you know, trying to get a final decision on whether or not they would help with the land, haven't had a response. So as you've said, Hannah, I think that unfortunately that is the result. It's disappointing, but that appears to be a non-starter.
Thank you. Yeah, disappointing. Yeah, about the trees, I think some of them have disappeared. I'm not actually sure what the current state is, and I'm not sure if we are looking at planting any more. I'm not obviously not averse to that. We might do and maybe plant them somewhere different, so it's not quite so obvious and accessible to people passing by. I don't know. It's not actually high on my list at the moment, Matthew, I have to say. You know.
It's okay. I think it might be on the chair's list because he and Councillor Mackie have been charged with a responsibility to plant trees under the, well, actually the chair can say more, but it's the Platinum scheme, I think it's called. But anyway, tree planting in plain English.
Okay, if anybody wants to come and plant trees for me, I'd be very happy.
Might see you there. Thank you.
Okay, before I move to Carl, yes, on that, Councillor Mackie and myself are heavily involved with the new committee to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee next year. And the theme is to plant a tree for the Jubilee. And if Councillor Mackie hasn't been in touch with you, Hannah, I'm sure he will, to invite the school to look at the possibility of planting a tree for this celebration of our greatest monarch ever, 70 years on the throne. I'm sure he will be in touch.
He has been in touch, and we have agreed. Mr. Oman's dealing with it. We have agreed, not agreed. Obviously, you know, we are going to do that. Yep.
Well, I'm presuming, well, it's frozen. I think he did invite me in, did he?
He did.
Yeah. Thank you. So look, Matthew, I hope I don't sound too unkind, but for me, we've just kicked the issues right in a row again, you know. So I cannot, now look, not for a minute am I suggesting that we need a new school, but there's no denying that there are certain elements of a school estate which are non-functional. Now, if we'd had a consultation years ago to, you know, give the opportunity for the community to discuss whether we do need a new school or what do we need on our campus, you know, these things have got to be drawn out, but we need finances for all of these things, and until we do it, you know, that's never going to be a reality. You've just spoken about being on the budget committees, and for me, the message is pretty clear. I think we're just kicking the issues down the road further. And you know, it's so important. We keep speaking about depopulation. There can be no doubt that anyone thinking about relocating to Caithness, in particular on our ward, their first point of contact is going to be, what have we got in terms of skills? You know, so I think it's important that we're at least seeing the debate and debate it properly and what we provide. You know, what does and what should a school provide? You know, in modern settings. You know, I don't think there's any doubt that there are better examples in some respects when you look at a holistic thing of what a school should provide. So. I say to you, I think we need to instigate a consultation. We're running out of time as councillors. There's going to be an election next year, but that's my hope, that at least we've got us as part of the debate for the election. Let's give the community some input into this. So I'll leave it there. Oh, and one thing, let me thank you for emails about Mount Pleasant School. It must be worrying to deal with. My question was going to be about virtual learning, but you've asked it already. But let's hope that you know, everyone's got a prompt return to full health. So thank you again.
Hi there. So I just had a call from Councillor Mackay saying his whole system has went down just now. Hannah, did you had your hand up there? Were you want to respond to Carl?
Sorry, yes, I was just going to say that I think hopefully what somebody would look for in a school goes way beyond just the physical building. That was all. And I do actually, as I said originally, I mean, I do feel more, as Matthew was saying, that it's, if we could have a smaller amount of money, which might be a possibility in the given, you know, in the current circumstances to maintain the building, that would be, you know, that's adequate, that's fine. I mean, we're not going to get a new build, so I don't see any point in pushing for one. It would make more sense to ask for a manageable amount of money to keep the building, which we're all quite happy with, relatively happy with, you know, keep this building in good order. That was all.
Okay, thanks very much. So I think possibly this might be a good time to have a 5-minute break, if that's okay. Willie's going to try and get back on, if you're all happy with that.
Yep, that's good, Matt. Yeah. Thank you, Hannah, very much.
Right, okay. Well, we'll continue with the agenda, and Councillor Raymond Bremner, the new chair of Area Committee, will take over the reins. Raymond, we've gone through 7 items, all very easily. We're now on item number 8, visitor management, parking and motorhome provision. We have 2 more items to go after that. And I was intending to have a coffee break after this item number 8, but it's entirely up to yourself. So Raymond, on you go. We've got Shane Manning talking to this one.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks very much, Willie, and thanks everybody for bearing with me while I dealt with that issue. I've just given you a quick update. Most of you know what the update is. I don't need to put it in the public domain, but yeah, thanks for your support there just now. And I hope things will turn out okay, but very much thanks to you, Willie, for taking over at such immediate short notice. And welcome to Shane Manning. And I get back in time for item number 8. I'll bet you'll be delighted with that, Shane. So over to yourself for item number 8.
There we go. Thanks very much, Chair. No, it would not be worth proceeding if you hadn't been present for this item. There's no doubt about that. So members, thanks for your time today. The paper I'm speaking to, it relates to basically the visitor management plan for the Highlands based on this year's activity and preparing for next year's activity. So 2 of the key strategies that came from our work with the Tourism Committee were to identify pressure points on the network where we could introduce better management of the facility for visitors and generate the necessary income that could help us in year support some investment in some of the sites as well as an added bonus. And the concept of invitation to pay was a result of those discussions. So invitation to pay basically means that we install our standard parking meters in the locations. These are all existing regulated car parks, so they're currently subject to council operation or control. And we invite visitors to pay for using the facility. We use a sign which tells them that this is invitation to pay, and it explains to them that this money, income generated here, can be used to support local leisure facilities and other local improvements. We've delivered two sites already, 4 car parks in total. So we've delivered 3 sites in Nairn along the shoreline. And we've delivered 1 in Inverness, which is the new leisure car park at the Torvane area next to the old golf course. And they have had quite considerable success, especially in Nairn. Generated some £26,000 since 24th of June. Basically on the premise that there's no enforceable charges, and the site at Torvane is growing, so it's reached £2,000 last month, September, income on the invitation to pay basis. So we've identified approximately 20 sites spread across the local authority, of which the sites that are listed in the paper relate to Caithness. And I'll be presenting a very, very similar paper to each of the relevant committees. I've got Wester Ross tomorrow, for example. Now, the additional item on this paper relates to a pragmatic approach to managing motorhomes. So what has been clear through 2021-22 season was the massive influx of visitors in a self-contained vehicle, which we all know is a motorhome or a camper van, who have been coming to the Highlands as part of the staycation growth due to COVID. Now, we envisage there being a sustained demand. It may decrease, but we think that the presence of the Highlands on people's radar as a staycation destination, we will see an upturn in that, which I think will be sustained going through in the future, but that will be subject to monitoring, obviously. So one of the approaches that we're taking, what we're looking to do is make an amendment to the terms and conditions of the car park, and that would basically allow them, which they currently cannot do legally, to stay in the car park for a maximum stay of 24 hours. We're not creating campsites, we're not creating airs. What we're doing is just letting a tin box, which is currently banned from being there overnight, to actually stay there overnight. All activities must be contained within the vehicle, and a small fee will be levied for that service. So that's the general context of the paper, members. I'll not go through it in detail. I just really look for your input and debate on the sites that we've identified.
Thanks very much for Shane. Thanks very much for that, Shane. I'll hold my comments until later on. I'd very much like to hear the considerations of other members. Opening it up to other members for your comments on the paper in front of you. Carl, we'll start with yourself.
Thanks, Raymond. Thanks, Shane. Shane, I realise last comment you seek comment on specific locations. Now, I've got to confess, I was not a member of the Tourism Committee. Do you mind if we just put a wee bit of time in and understand the rationale here? Now, when I read the paper, immediately invitation to pay strikes you. You've got some questions in your head, but I absolutely appreciate if you're involved in a committee, you discuss these things. There is a good rationale and understanding for that. But for me, you obviously think when you're invited to pay, you're relying on common sense and a general sense of responsibility from people towards the environment and other users and communities. But we already understand that there exists people who have offended. We've seen graphic evidence of that over this summer. So the question is, I guess, why is it invitation to pay? Why don't we just make this a mandatory payment? So if you don't mind, can I get just a wee bit of background on that first, if you don't? Thank you.
Raymond, do you want me to respond now? Yep. So Councillor Rossi, you know, very good points. The philosophy, there's two elements to this. If we were to make enforceable charges apply to these car parks, we would have to publish an amendment to the traffic regulation order, which and that amendment is to empower the Roads Authority to enforce the charges. We do not need a traffic regulation order if we invite people to pay, if they're non-enforceable. So we have a statutory right as a Roads Authority, as any landowner does, to invite people to pay to use the services that they provide. And we don't need a traffic order for that. What we need the traffic order for is the power to enforce. So the traffic order would be requesting, can we'd be consulting on those powers. We wouldn't be consulting on the pay and display as such, although that's an obvious issue that relates to it. But what we are technically asking for is the power to enforce. So invitation to pay is a quick turnaround, so we can have these in place for next season. And what's been proved by the forestry model across Scotland is that the compliance rate, they've been doing this now for several years, is 60 to 80%. So what the decision of the committee was to let's deal with the good citizens. Let's plan our strategy based on normal people and deal with the abnormal users through enforcement and other such measures, whether it be fly tipping or other activities. Let's not plan our strategy as a tourist destination based on simply the bad customers. Let's base our strategy on the majority of customers. Let's provide them with a safe place to park up for one night off the main road, not occupy laybys, which should be better used for emergencies, shall we say. But we can't regulate them as such as easily as we can our off-street sites. So that's a very short summation of the debate that was had at the Tourism Committee and the reasoning why we're taking this approach this year. Monitor the effectiveness, and obviously it's a living thing. We will come back to members if we feel as communities or as officers or as members that we'll leave it as it is, invitation to pay, or no, we really need to publish an order to start enforcement.
Thanks for that explanation. Is that okay, Carl? Okay, any other members wanting to make comment on the paper in front of you? Willie?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I welcome this absolutely 100%. We are so far behind in this county when it comes to paying your way. Every tourist that comes over the order through Ray Village, the first thing they look for when they arrive at a town or a village is a parking meter. I spoke to hundreds of tourists over the last few years, and I can't believe how everything is free in this county. All the Dunnet's Head, Noss Head, wherever they want to go, Comster Cairns, Walligo Steps, it's all free, free, free. They look for the parking meters. We have a classic example here in John O'Groats. We all know the success of John O'Groats, where the invitation to pay is in the form of a donation. Would you like to donate to help upkeep this car park for £2 a day? Tourists are so embarrassed, they're throwing the money at the machine. It's unbelievable the money they're making. Up to 24 hours, I see you've got £1. Nothing. Up to 2 hours, sorry, 2 hours, £1. That's just buttons. Up to 4 hours, £2. 12 hours, £3. For 24 hours, £5 to park, an invitation to pay. That is absolutely embarrassing. It's really, really good. The locations, Shane, that you've mentioned, I'm all for them. Noss Head, yes. Dinklesby Head, Camps. Riverside, yes, yes. I'm halfway there. Reese Beach was a bit of a problem with us because of these golfers, the lovely golfers who like to park their car there. I'm not too sure if we got that one worked out yet, probably yet, but certainly invitation to pay, I'm all for it. Either that or would you like to make a donation? But I think the invitation to pay is good for me, and yeah, I really support this. Well done, Shane, a lot of work you put into here. Thanks, meantime, Chair.
Thanks, Willie. Jill, I'm seeing your hand up.
Yeah, can I ask, are they going to be able to pay by card? Because there are so many tourists now that come up and they don't have any cash.
Yes, Councillor Tilt. All our machines now are smart meters, we call them, so they go in with card payment facilities.
Great, thank you.
In fact, just for members' benefit, when we installed the first machine about 2017, it was about 25% uptake on the card payment. As you can imagine, it's now at some sites hitting 65% uptake on card payments.
Okay, no bother. Matthew, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, that's a very good question that Jill's just asked, because it reminds me of a couple of years ago, I think it was, I was at one of these car parks on the north end of Skye. There was quite a brisk breeze blowing, just as there is today in Caithness, and because the broadband signal was rather weak, the machine wasn't actually emitting its ticket for a minute or two, and I watched one particular tourist who he was patiently waiting, and then all of a sudden the machine fired out his ticket, but the breeze took it away, so the poor gentleman had to charge across the car park and off onto the hill to catch his ticket. So although I'm being like slightly humorous, hopefully, there is a serious point behind it. Have we checked as best we can, you know, that there's a signal so that we do actually get this money in? But other than that, as Willie's just said, Shane, really good work, and it'll be very, very interesting to see how this works. And I'm optimistic. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Matthew. Humorous, but a serious point. We don't want tickets flying all over the place and where folks feeling as though that's their only way from stopping them getting any sort of repercussions. Struan, I'm seeing that you've got your hand up next.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question from Shane around about if the decisions obviously made today, we agree this. How are we going to monitor it? I suppose is probably what I'm saying. Is this something that will be reported to Caithness committee on a quarterly, annually, whatever basis that may be? Because one of the things that I'm kind of thinking it's two-pronged, Chair, is that one, obviously, you know, potentially good for raising revenue, but also I think it could be indicative of actually kind of understanding what's going on in the county in respect to tourism and management, because you can actually use this data as being a little bit of an extrapolation for how busy things are, what's the kind of the environment that we're in within the industry. And I'm just wondering how that's going to come about in terms of how it's reported, because it's not necessarily that traditional model, Shane, which obviously I know Inverness and like Aber previously have, which is obviously it's mandatory. So just wanting to know how it potentially will get reported to us. But I do welcome the report.
Okay, Shane, a couple of points that you've got there from Matthew and Struan before bring Willie back in. I see that Willie's wanting to comment again, and then Carl. So over to yourself, Shane, first.
Thank you, Chair. So Matthew, yes, you know, you make a good point. It's one thing as an officer I've struggled to deal with is the weather, and my staff were always telling me about the blowing the hurleys on the west coast. But yeah. So these machines allow us. They do issue a traditional ticket. You're correct. But there are options we have for what we call cashless parking. So that's the Ringo service, which allows you to create a virtual ticket. So you pay remotely with an app on your phone. But again, these are all reliant on technologies and phone signals. But we will check that when we put the machine in, that it's in a location that a phone signal can be received. And the machines that we use, you mentioned a delay. There are some things we can do around that. So there's things where we can pre-approve the payment. So we can accept that the card is valid at the time, and then it processes them in batches when no one's at the machine, and that cuts down the delay and the risk that you highlighted. There is a slight risk to the council that we might lose £1 if somebody's card actually is declined, but it's a risk we're willing to take, and we have used that in other locations. So I've got a few options to try and address the problems that you've raised. Councillor Mackie, good points on monitoring. And this is another advantage of us using what we call smart meters, in that we get very detailed reports on right down to the hour, minute and second that the transaction was made. And from the bays available, we can make some reasonable assessments on the occupancy levels. I would suggest on a red, amber, green basis that the car park is 50% occupied, 75% occupied. We can't go down to actual hard data because we would need to be physically monitoring the spaces, and in a million years we're never going to be able to do that. But it does give you data which doesn't exist at the moment, as you rightly highlight. You know, we start getting some useful information. And an additional issue which will help you with that, and other members across the tourist destination, is we're looking to roll out our public space sensors, which we've delivered in Inverness, and we're looking to deliver these in Skye and Loch Harbour. And I've also got preliminary outline plans for the whole of the North Coast 500 route, which obviously includes Caithness and Sutherland. And these are they use ANPR, but they don't. It's screened ANPR, so they convert the number into a hexadecimal code, which cannot be backtraced. So this is anonymized data. But what you can then start to do over a period of a year is say, well, we had X number of vehicles that came to Inverness, then they went to Ullapool, then they went to Smoo Cave, and then they went to Wick. So you start to get a map of the journeys and the choices that people are making and the volumes. So this is us using smart technology to have a much more strategic approach to visitor management. It's going to take time, but we've started, and we have a destination where we want to get to.
Thanks for that explanation. That okay, Matthew? That okay, everybody? Fine. We'll move on to Willie. Willie, it was your hand up that was next, and then Carl. Although I'll just get clarification from Matthew. Matthew, do you want to come back in first?
No, like I say, sorry.
Thanks. Willie, yourself.
Thank you, Chair. This agenda item has just gone on social media 2 hours ago. I know that the reporters are waiting in the wings for the outcome. I can see comments appearing already, irrespective of that. I think it's a great invitation, this, to pay. One thing we must remember, Shane, I think I'm right in saying this, there's no attendants going around checking your ticket on the dashboard. Something we don't want to broadcast, obviously, but we want the invitation to pay to be a success. But it's not been policed. Am I right, Shane?
Policed, I mean, these car parks are subject to enforcement already. So the existing terms and conditions of use of the car park, which is there to protect the site from abuse, that's there already. And our officers do make time, especially during the summer, to try and visit these sites as often as they can. But you're right, the actual ticket on the dashboard is not an issue that they will be dealing with. They will obviously be maintaining the machines and making sure that any cash in it is collected and deposited, but they won't be booking people for not displaying a ticket. However, if somebody is causing a contravention, another contravention for the site, then they are subject to getting a ticket. That's already established. These sites are already regulated. So other activities are still dealt with by officers, but pay and display will not be enforced.
Thanks, Shane. Well done. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Willie. Carl.
Thanks, Karen Raymond. Shane, just looking at common good car parks 5.1 and then 6.1. So on a question of locations that have been chosen, when I think about Thurso specifically, and understanding where motorhomes have been parking and some of the issues, I don't think we've got them included in a report here. Now, I fully accept this is going to be I forget how you described it, living document, living project where we can revisit, but particularly in 6.1, so the goal is to allow motorhomes to occupy an allocated bay. Now, I'm not sounding pedantic here, but is it quite simply you're going to give one bay in a car park? So look, I'm right opposite Riverside car park in Thurso here. I'm sure you'll be familiar with it, Shane, but is that a case? Will there be one bay? Because trust me, during the summer there would be sometimes 6, 7, 8 motorhomes in place. So just to get your feedback on that, Shane, thank you very much.
Councillor Rossi, good point. No, we look to, each car park has to be dealt with separately, so there's not one fits all. So, for example, a larger car park, we would designate half a dozen or so bays. We'd make a reasonable attempt at setting aside area in which motorhomes could safely park in a larger bay. And there may not be any bays currently in the car park, but we would look to define the location in which they would need to park. If they're smaller motorhome, they could fit in another vehicle bay, fine. But we would look to identify larger bays, but the rules of the car park would apply to wherever they parked, which basically means they must contain all activities within the vehicle. So, we're not creating a campsite. You can't get your deck chairs out and your table and have your tea, and you can't string a washing line out and all the rest of it. We're talking about legally allowing a tin box to stay in a site which it currently isn't allowed to stay in. We're not talking about camping. Now, we all know that in reality, some people may try and bend the rules, but it's down to us as officers to try and educate them and enforce that, but also have adequate signing to explain the rules to them when they're in the site. And Thurso is definitely needs a visit and a conversation. I didn't have any specifically identified at the time in which I wrote this report of gas, and we would happily come back to you and promote those. But understanding the philosophy allows us a much quicker approach in the future. This is the first time members are considering this.
Thank you. Yes, Raymond, you.
Willie, you wouldn't do me a favour and take over again, and I'm actually going to leave the meeting here. Okay.
Okay, Raymond, I shall certainly do. You take care now again. So let's continue with the agenda item. Andrew, I've got you up here. Would you like to speak to Shane?
Yeah, thank you, Willie. And thank you for the report, Shane. It's quite interesting to read through. I think it's fair to say the invitation to pay scheme has obviously had its successes in other areas. You outlined Nairn and I think Inverness in your opening comments. And I know from our experience here locally, the likes, I know it's not council run, but the car park in John O'Groats has been really successful in that regard as well. Each summer during the tourist season, they're taking in several £1,000s, which they're able to channel into redeveloping the John O'Groats area. So I think the idea of the invitation to pay scheme obviously has its merits, and it's demonstrated that already in other areas. I think, Willie's touched on it already. There will inevitably be a level of concern that arises in the local community when they start to see parking charges being brought in, whether it's an invitation to pay scheme or enforced parking charges. So I think it would be really useful if we could come away from today's meeting with, I think, an ability to give some kind of reassurance to the public that this is not enforced parking charges. And if it ever was to become enforced, that's an if that I don't think many of us, I think certainly the local members here, aren't willing to contemplate at this point. I think that's probably fair to say. We're not in favour of enforced parking charges, full stop. But from I suppose, a legislative point of view, from a legal point of view, Shane, I was just wondering if you could perhaps sort of outline the difference and the mechanism legally as to how enforced parking charges would come about and how this is very different.
Yeah, yes, Councillor Sinclair, very good points indeed, and all too familiar an argument that, and discussion that I've been having, obviously relating to Nairn, for example. So all I can do is make it very, very clear to anybody viewing this or discussing this afterwards, is that there are statutory obligations on us as a local authority before we can impose parking charges. We can introduce, as we've said, a donation. These are basically classed legally as donations. And for example, the council doesn't have to pay VAT on them because they're classed as donations. If we were to introduce or wish to introduce any permanent charges, there's two elements to consider. One is our public pay and display, public car parks. If we wish to make them pay and display, we have to do a public consultation, which has to be go to a statutory consultation, which will in this case include any community councils, and we'll have to go to a full public consultation, fully advertised and noticed to the public. If there were objections to us introducing enforcement of parking charges, it would be the elected members who would be the panel who would judge whether or not to overrule the objections. So there's quite stringent safeguards to protect the public from some people's belief that we would be sneaking something in. There's no means in which we could do so. We would have to go through a statutory public consultation. Now, when it comes to a common good car park, there's another layer. So not only what I've just described to you, but in addition to that, there would have to be a statutory common good consultation, because it would be argued that this would be a change of use. In that the choice to pay or not to pay is not a change of use. However, the enforcement of payment is a change of use. And as being inalienable land that is subject to common good regulation, it would require an additional statutory consultation, and it would need the approval of a sheriff before we could introduce enforceable pay and display charges on common good land. So I think the comfort I would offer the members and more widely to the public is that these are the grounds under which the processes we would have to follow before anybody would be booked for not paying for pay and display. I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Shane. Andrew, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that's I think that certainly gives me on a personal level a high level of assurance, because I know that on a personal level I would never support enforced parking charges in the town or across the county more widely, and I don't know whether my fellow members are of the same view, but I think that given that there's resistance from the local members for that to be the case, and also given that there are significant bureaucratic hurdles, to put it that way, given the nature of common good land, I hope that gives some reassurance to anyone who does have concerns that this is enforced parking charges through the back door.
Chair, the one other thing just to give more comfort would be that all three sites in Nairn are all common good land. So we're very, very aware of the sensitivities around this, it won't be new for Caithness. So we're establishing a very strong set of procedures for how we would deal with any sites that would be classed as common good land.
Thank you very much, Shane. Members, Mark, any more hands? I can't see the hands at the moment. Any more hands up, Mark?
Yeah, Matthew Reese, Councillor Reese.
Matthew, okay, Matthew, on you come.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry for my phone.
Mark, keep me right on the hands.
I will do, Willie.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andrew, for what you just said, of what you kind of dissected it very well indeed. And I've got one, the Groats car park's not in my ward, but my understanding is the KW14 postcode holders are exempt. I don't know how that could fit into this scheme, but my view, rather like Andrew's, I think, is that, well, one of the many benefits of living in Caithness is that it's a very outdoor orientated community, and there's so many different groups, clubs, informal and formal groups that use the beaches and the car parks for different uses, everything from pony trekking to walking, even to litter cleaning. Imagine a litter cleaning group getting a ticket for parking. Fishermen, also night fishing, Dunnet Beach, places like that. And I don't know if this is possible, Shane, but I, like Andrew, Councillor Snickler, sort of, I think one of the attractions of here is being able to park and use the coastline in particular for own purposes. And moving to Thurso very briefly, there are so many, as we have discussed before, small car parks where even in the event of mandatory car parking coming into the town, there are so many areas around the edge of the town centre where, let's be honest, tourists are very unlikely to find them and use them, and they would be always accessible to local people. And I recently had a long letter from someone from down south who had got a ticket from our colleague for parking in the Riverside car park in a motorhome, and I think was a bit aggrieved about it. When I kind of explained the background to all this and why there are some restrictions, he accepted what we're doing, and loosely speaking, I think made a comment, that the amount of money requested was very, very reasonable. As Willie was saying a few minutes ago, these are not large sums of money. So I just have a query about the KW14 postcode as is used at Groats. Shane, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Reese, no, to be honest, it's not required, and it's incredibly difficult to do. As soon as you start creating permits, there's a huge cost. But on the basis that this is invitation to pay, we don't require to create an exemption for anybody. As a member of the public, you just say, I'm not paying, and nothing will happen. It's quite simple, really. The complication only arises when you start getting into enforceable charges, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're just not talking about that at the moment.
Okay, you've answered my question very clearly and frankly, so much appreciated, Shane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Shane. Mark, any more hands up? I'm just out of hands at the moment.
No other hands, Councillor Mackay.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mark. Thank you, Shane. Manny, as usual, great to see you again. This is, members, an invitation to pay. We must always remember that. And as you can see in the papers, the committee is invited to agree the location proposed and amend and add to them as appropriate, and agree the immediate delivery of invitation to pay at the locations in section 8.1 of the report, and charging to be voluntary at this stage, and the approach to motorhome parking at sites identified at 8.2 of the report. Members agreed? Yes?
Agreed, Roy.
Okay, members, we agree. Well done, thank you. We've gone a good 2 hours past now. We have 2 items left, the Flow Country and the Housing Report. I suggest we take a 15-minute break for a cup of coffee and join us back at 12:30. Agenda item number 9, members, the Flow Country World Heritage Site nomination update. And here we've got Stephen Andrews to speak to this report. Okay, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen so as we can maybe look at some nice pictures along with the words I'm going to give you. Let's get that organised. Hopefully you can.
Yep, that's it. We can see that now.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. So I just want to give you really a general overview of the project and where we've got up to. Obviously, there's detail contained within the paper that you've had to look at, but I want to speak a bit wider than that, really. So just to kind of quickly run through the points I want to cover, I just want to go through very briefly why it is we're doing what we're doing, what it is that's kind of so special about the Flow Country, and what it is we're nominating it for. And within that, kind of think about the elements that we're putting together for the nomination document and the management plan that we have to do, and then just move on to kind of briefly run through kind of what progress we've made and where we are in the timeline and what we're going to move on to in the coming months. So in terms of why, I mean, we can look back to the kind of 80s when there was a lot of development in the region, particularly of forestry, and it was realised that there was significant damage going on to some of the blanket bog in the region. So this is just an image from an aerial shot of just east of Antlebrek Station, and you can see a lot of the the area that is now covered in trees, but some of these ditches actually never were viable for planting of trees. But it's about the areas that have not been affected by forestry as much as some of those that have been and are maybe being put to restoration. And this led to the publication of the Nature Conservancy Council document on the flow country and the value of the peatlands. And in fact, at that time, it was recognised that the flow country was especially well qualified for World Heritage listing. And so when it comes to what is World Heritage about, well, there's kind of 4 elements I think that are really important. It's to protect, conserve, present and transmit. So that's the duty of parties to the World Heritage Convention. So they're the things we need to kind of have in our mind as to what World Heritage is about. So in terms of then what is it we're actually nominating the flow country for, it's important that I have this clear in our minds. And it's what we term the outstanding universal value. And there's a number of criteria that fall out of this. There's the integrity of the site, and then there's also the protection and the management of the site. So I just want to talk about the criteria first of all. And this is something that we've been working on over a number of months through workshopping with experts across the kind of different scopes. And the main criteria that we're looking at are the ecological processes that are ongoing. So this is broadly the blanket bog itself. It's also the variations we see within the blanket bog, and also the kind of the 4th dimensions of the kind of time archive it provides, and the fact that we see researchers from around the world coming to the flow country to research because it is such an important example of this ecological system. The second element, which is really key and I think has extra prominence right now with COP26 going on, is that we have part of the processes within this peatland are the carbon sequestration and storage. So it's really important that a healthy bog is drawing down that carbon and it's keeping it in place. So it's really important to protect. And there's also a slightly further reaching element of this, which is the water quality that basically, I mean, the peatlands of Caithness and Sutherland acts as a massive water filter and help the riverine systems that drain from the area support Atlantic salmon populations, which have remained buoyant as opposed to other areas where they've been in decline, freshwater pearl mussel, which is obviously relatively endangered, and European eel, which is also endangered. Then the third element of this is the biodiversity that it holds in terms of the blanket bog itself. So we're talking largely about the bird species that are found across the area. Caithness and Sutherland is kind of like a massive roundabout come, I don't know, bus station for birds. It's kind of on the major terminus of those coming from the north and coming from the south and continental and maritime. And so it's said that basically within the flow country, what you can see within a few miles, you'd have to travel thousands of miles elsewhere to see that particular assemblage. So in terms of that's the criteria. The next really important bit is the integrity of the site. And this is about the scale that we have. I mean, this map's about what, 100 kilometers across. Certainly these purple splodges, which are our draft of the flow country World Heritage Site boundary. So it offers great integrity to that, but by having that larger area, it means that these environments have themselves they're insulated to some degree from the impacts of surrounding land use and climate change. But what's also really important within this is that we've recognised that the flow country is not just about blanket bog. There's forestry there, there's crofting there, and if you look at this boundary, I hope what you will see is that the straths are largely excluded. There's large areas of forestry there which are beside the site but not within it, and so that's recognised as well when we're drawing up the boundary, and this is an important element that we need to start consulting on. And then there's also the areas around the management plan and how we manage a lot of these land uses. I really like this image because what we can see is some really beautiful areas of relatively natural blanket bog on the bottom left. We can see some kind of historical drainage ditches to the right of that. We've got old conifer plantations that have been taken down. They're undergoing restoration because there's a wind farm being built there. And it's a recognition that in managing this landscape, we need to think about all of those elements and the benefits they bring to the local economy, and in fact how we balance that with the protection of the really important habitats that we have here. So in terms of the progress, well, I mean, the really key things that I've kind of put up are really honing those criteria and again a good understanding of those, and then the boundary map, which have progressed really nicely. And so we're wanting, well, these needed to be done by the end of this year, as does a lot of the writing around the different elements that go into the nomination dossier. We've also had ongoing briefings with communities, councillors, as here, MSPs and MPs. And as we move into the spring of next year, we're looking to organise more formal consultation with various groups. And then as we get into the middle of the year, we'll edit in those the results of our consultation, and then eventually we'll submit through DCMS, well, through the Scottish Government, and then through DCMS, and then on to UNESCO. And then following a significant pause, we'll get a decision in mid-2024. But what I like to think is that will give us a significant time to kind of prepare, hopefully, for inscription and the potential benefits that can bring to the area. So in terms of just the next step, I just thought I'd highlight, well, I suppose the next step really is starting to get the consultation going in a bit more earnest. But first of all, a bit of a look back. I think it's important to recognise that we have consulted widely on this project already, and this is work that was led by Joe Perry. And we had about 78% positive feedback from the communities, which I think is really exceptional, particularly given that we consulted over a much larger boundary, and I think that maybe created some concerns, particularly around the effects of forestry and wind farms. But we've kind of hopefully taken those on board, and now we need to move forward with consulting on the new kind of revised proposed boundary. So this has already been ongoing. We've had the kind of soft consultation, as I've been terming it, so briefings with people like yourselves, presentations across various kind of forums. We've had significant press coverage, which has been really nice. Peatlands have never been higher in the public consciousness, I like to think. I even was on STV at some point, which is an interesting experience. And we obviously have a presence at COP currently, so there's real great momentum there. But we're aware that the next stage is formalising that consultation. And so we've got some early consultation on the draft boundary that we need to follow up, first of all with major landowners, forestry interests. And then we're looking in the spring towards a mail drop to everyone within the region, from which we will give a progress update, highlight the potential for online consultation, which we'll set up, and we'll also try and arrange a series of drop-in events similar to what was done previously. There are also plans to set up a business forum. This hopefully will allow us to start thinking about how businesses will be able to take advantage of this designation, and also to try and engage with some of the wider community, and particularly the schools who want to set up a community mapping project, which we're trying to move forward just now, particularly with primary schools. There's just an example there on the slide of what was done for the Heart of Neath Orkney, which is our nearest other World Heritage Site. So hopefully that's given you an overview of where we're at with this and where we're going. So I'd just like to say thank you for giving me the time to present to you. And we just really appreciate your continued support on this. Thank you.
Well done, Stephen. Well done indeed. That's a fantastic report there. Members will be looking for questions and comments. There's obviously huge benefits, Stephen, of a World Heritage Site. Am I right in saying tourism, international attention, which would be good for the county of Caithness and Sutherland? Is there any other benefits that comes to your mind right away on this reaching a World Heritage Site?
Yeah, well, yeah, the thing is, I mean, there's a couple of things that go hand in hand with that. I think when you mention tourism, it is important. You know, we're obviously in the backdrop of fairly high levels of tourism historically, but that has focused a lot around the coast on the NC 500. And I think one of the things that a World Heritage Site within the centre of these counties will hopefully draw tourists away from the margins and into the centre, and also potentially slow tourism down to some degree. That's a big part of our aims. There's also, I mean, this at a very early stage, the kind of work that's been going around green finance, and I think there's a partnership probably that can be made between green finance and the promotion of the World Heritage Site. So I think that's another element. But I must say that's something I'm only just getting some awareness of, and it's something we need to work up further.
That's good, Stephen. You did mention COP26, which has caused a lot of attention down there in Glasgow. Basically, we have to conserve these sites. We have to conserve them. And immediately off the top of your head, how could we learn to conserve these sites over the generations to come?
I think the really key thing here is we're actually doing a really good job of it already. And I think it's recognizing that, but making sure that everyone takes pride in it as well. Because, yeah, I mean, I don't know about you all. I grew up in Sutherland, so I apologise for that. I realise this is the Caithness committee, but my awareness of the flows was not as high as it should have been. I remember when I started thinking about them and thinking I want to understand what these are, but I do think we need to just keep on with that message and trying to get people out there and show them how special a place it is. As much as I think there's some comments about how wet it's been this last little while, that's great for the bogs. So, you know, getting people to think along those lines, I think it's good to look at something which maybe is a bit negative, but go, well, no, but we know that's good as well. So, yeah, I think it's about raising that awareness and making sure it stays in people's consciousness.
Good, Stephen. Yes, I know Forsnar very well. I've been travelling that Strath Road for the best part of 50 years, but for my sins, I have yet to take the footpath out to your lookout tower. But I hope to be up there next week, and I want to do that. I want to do that, Stephen, to go out there and view the wonderful site and be in front of us. So yeah, well done. Okay, Councillor Rossi would like to come in.
Thank you, Wally. Stephen, thank you. Stephen, I did register a declaration of interest at the start. You know as well as I do that I'm a member of the working group. So look, I've been fortunate. Indeed, last week was the most recent meeting where I was able to attend, and absolutely fantastic to hear so many academics in the room waxing lyrical just about what we have. And I think that's borne out when you've been invited to present at COP26. I think it absolutely highlights the value of what we've got right on our doorsteps here. So. And I was really interested to hear your comments, Stephen. I think you said a bus station for birds. I was thinking about my mother was born in Spittal, and she just absolutely loved the Casimir she generally referred to, and then before she died, a term Flow Country came along, and she was so just ecstatic. Because she understood, what it did, and she was always so vexed when there was a commercialization aspects, and she felt so disappointed that there wasn't that recognition. So it's a special thing for me as well. I guess in terms of questions, Stephen, look, I'm absolutely sold on this, and part of last week's presentation we had. From the Slate project, maybe you can talk about, but essentially it was people who were kind enough to share their experience of going through what we are now and what we've got to do for a nomination process. But then they were giving us an idea of some of the benefits, and they were quite excited. I actually got really excited because their project was, I think, it was titled Slate, and when I think about Caithness in particular, we're stoning ourselves. Goodness me, we've got two opportunities here, But seriously, as always, I think we've got to. I'm always keen that we never miss an opportunity here. So, and you touched on green finance. What have we as councillors, and I guess as kind of junior politicians, what do we need to do to be lobbying now? Because a decision's imminent, 2024. But we've got to think, we're going to expect a greater influx of people to come and see and enjoy Flow Country. So how do we need to start thinking about that, Stephen? I think that's quite an important question for us. So many thanks again, Stephen, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. Matthew, yes, I can see your hand up there. Thank you, Mark. Councillor Matthew Reese.
Thanks, Chair. Afternoon, Stephen. I agree with a lot of what Carl's just been saying, and I think it was probably yesterday that Joe Perry was making a big speech down at COP26. So I hope that went well for Joe, and he sort of did a huge amount of, you know, what I would call the background work maybe. And I learned a lot more about the ins and outs of the mechanics of all this, and it is a complicated process. Really just a couple of observations, almost for want of a better word. People I've sort of met at community councils and others are just sort of, the only thing that they seem to sort of possibly be a bit worried about is they kind of worry, will there be any sort of planning restrictions on what they can do with their homes? And Joe explained this very well, and extremely well actually, by just sort of saying, look, people who just want to put up a shed on their croft or something, it's going to make no difference whatsoever. And assuming that's the case, I think it's important that we reassure people that and I'm fully in support, if we do get this fantastic status, you know, that these sort of everyday things will not be adversely affected, because that leads me on to what could be the local benefits. And I'm going to be slightly sort of selfish. I'm talking more about the people than the environment and the peat and the birds, although I loved your phrase, bird roundabout. I'm going to remember that one, partly because I used to be the police wildlife crime coordinator for Northern Constabulary. So yeah, I'm heavily into all that, I don't mind saying. But the answer to about local benefits is, as I understand it in a very amateurish sort of way, is that this is going to generate more tourism. It'll generate more groups from universities from far afield, hopefully coming to study the area simply because it's got the UNESCO status. And there are all the obvious spin-offs there in all sorts of areas of the local economy, I hope. And I hope even more you're going to sort of nod your head and basically say that, well, this is roughly speaking correct. And I think there's one big challenge here, and the chair and I agree to slightly differ on the vexed subject of onshore wind, but it's that I wish you well with trying to balance the bird roundabout with the wind farms and with, to use your words, the integrity of the site. And I know that the visual aspects of it are not, strictly speaking, technically at all important for the bid, which is surprising. But back in the real world, you know, I think the visual attractiveness and appearance is bound to increase. If we can preserve it, it would increase tourism. And there is, I'm not going to name him, but there's a well-known sage who once said memorably at a meeting involving councillors that Caithness may be bleak, but it is beautifully bleak. And I think that it's so true. And, you know, the flow country can come across as bleak, but the more you look into it, and I remember first few times came across red and black-throated divers out on the some of the lochs out in the flow country, Skyline Loch, places like this out at Altnabrech. It's incredibly moving, and you're right what you said, there's nowhere else quite like it. So good luck and all the best with it. It's just a deeply significant project, and I think we're in the beginning to just realize just how good it could be, assuming that all goes well. So as Carl said, you know, if there's anything we can be doing to help, please let us know. Thank you.
If I can just pick up on a couple of points there. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right about planning, and that's something we're acutely aware of. I hope we've yet to actually just figure out how many buildings would fall within the new site boundary as defined, but my feeling is it will be a handful.
Yeah.
Because we're really focusing on the peatlands, and I think that's appropriate, because, and one of the reasons I want to go through the criteria that we were nominating on is that it's important that we recognise that what certainly the Flow Country steering group for this project and probably ongoing the management of the site are about protecting the outstanding universal value. And as you correctly point out, that is not the landscape value. Landscape value is a really difficult and intangible element. And also, as we're all aware, wind farms are heavily divisive. And so what our kind of position as a Flow Country steering group is that we focus on the OUV, and there is a planning policies, etc., to hopefully manage the wind farm elements. And I mean, that's just the landscape it's within. And yeah, people have different views on wind farms. In some places they can seem quite beautiful, in other places they can seem industrialized, and that's not something for us to get into. And I completely agree with all of the community benefits that you highlight. And I think it's about, I think from a tourism point of view, I think it is about trying to really emphasize a different style of tourism, and also engage with landowners to open that up as well. Because one of the biggest problems we have, I suppose, when I think about the Flow Country as a World Heritage Site is access. And that sounds a bit odd, given that there's roads run right through it, but actually getting out into it is a challenge because it's a bog. But we have lots of estates, they have lots of tracks, and they're able, you can think of easily wildlife safaris and all sorts of things going on with that. In terms of the support from councillors, I think it's just key that we recognise that we need to lobby on, as it were, up into MSPs, and any support that can be given in that would be really valuable. I think we need to think about ongoing financial models. This is something that the steering group is looking at just now. It's unlikely to be a huge cost, but there's this basic understanding that with a World Heritage Site, the more you put in, the more will come out of it. And so as to whether that funding stream, we have to look to Scottish Government. I feel that a World Heritage Site is of the importance, or of a similar importance to a national park, for instance. So is there a way we can lobby towards getting central funding, or is it the case that we need to look at, well, where can we move money around within the council, which I know is not ever going to be an easy task with there not being much there. So yeah, but they're the areas that I see as key for support from council.
Thank you. Chair, can I just add 3 very quick points, almost machine gun style, if that's okay?
Okay, Matthew, yes.
Thank you. Very quickly, I wanted to just draw attention, Stephen, you may know already the new, well, it's not new now, it's been there 2 or 3 years, the viewpoint overlooking Loch Rangag, just off the A9 on the Carsey Mire. That is a tiny example of I quite often see tourists park there. It's a really attractive little thing, and if anyone hasn't been, I recommend it. And the same goes for the Fortinard Tower. I very seldom get one over the interim chair, Councillor Mackay, but I have been to your tower, well, whoever's tower it is. The views are fantastic. Highly recommend it, Willie. And the third point, Stephen, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but something about speaking with MSPs. I did go on a field trip out into the flows with the Minister, Marie Goujon, 2 or 3 years ago, and with our then MSP, and it was a stunning day. And I think the place speaks for itself, and just getting people to go there is, many people who go will want to come back, perhaps not on a day like this, but most of the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, Matthew. Thank you. Now, Councillor Rossi, would you like to come back in?
Just very briefly, Willie. Stephen, just thinking about your comment about wildlife safari and access, and I'm sure you'll be aware of our regular Northern Light showings and whatnot. And I often think I would give my eye teeth to get in the heart of the Flow Country. But what is the trade-off in there, and how have we got to think? So trade-off, in terms of, GVA value you've talked about. So, but business model, is that something the steering group's going to think on, focus on meantime now, or do we need to get different people thinking on that? But again, it just seems like huge opportunities. But it's a balance. You also mentioned the balance and protecting that environment. So just to get your guidance on that, please, Stephen.
Yeah, it's nice when you get asked a question and I feel I've got an answer right here for you, because we're actually engaged currently with Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And this seems it looks like a setup, doesn't it? But it's not. I don't think Carl was quite aware of we've got a study brief that we're putting together for getting an overview of the facilities that are in place, and then a projection of what might be possible. Because, as it stands, the development is going to be from a private on a private basis, but I think sometimes it's really useful for communities to be made aware of, and landowners, bigger landowners, be made aware of what might be possible. but there are certainly other World Heritage sites we can look to, and there's various things that's brought to mind, like the branding of Flow Country lamb or whatever else you're producing from the area. I think there's huge potential in kind of opening up access through long distance trails and trying to incorporate elements of income generation from that as well. So there are a huge amount of options, but yes, we do have a study which we're looking to commission, supported by HIE, to kind of scope that out a bit further.
Thanks, Stephen. Matthew, do you want to come back in? I see your hand up, Matthew. Is that the old hand?
Sorry, I'm freezing. No, I'm not freezing, but I don't want to come back in. Thank you.
Okay, members, any other questions or comments for Stephen on this very, very interesting presentation? No more comments, Stephen. I think I have to improve my carbon footprint myself, actually. If you want to give me any advice off the top of my head. I'm a very high mileage diesel van driver. I'm a peat cutter of the past in my teenage years. For the past 20 months, I've been burning a coal fire here in front of me, watching Microsoft Teams. Where do I start to improve the climate change?
I think that's a very, very big question. And yeah, I mean, I think one thing we could say is that we're all sat here with in front of our computers having this meeting. So that's probably one thing that's improved. And I must say, I have cut peat in my youth as well, and I'm quite glad I'm not doing it anymore. So perhaps looking at update your vehicle might be the thing to do if that's a possibility.
That's a good idea. I've been recommended that before. Okay, well done. Well done, Stephen. Thank you very much. Any more comments, members, from this very, very interesting presentation from Stephen Andrews? Thank you very much indeed. And committee, you are invited to note the contents of Stephen's report. Thank you. Right, let's move on now to our last, but by no means least, our 10th item, the housing report. And I think we have our principal housing officer with us, Margaret Ross. Are you there?
I am, thank you. After that lovely report from Stephen, this is going to be very, very boring. However, members are invited to consider the information provided in the housing performance report for the period 1st of April till the end of September, because we've dropped our housing reports to biannual, as you know. The one thing I do want to draw your attention to is the fact that this report is based on the reporting framework recommended by the Scottish Housing Regulator, which is why the report is very, very restricted in its nature. But as usual, I'm always happy to take any questions at the end, which might help to make things a bit more interesting for you. So the first thing we report on is repairs, the average length of time taken to complete emergency repairs. They have reduced in the last quarter in both wards, and performance remains well within the target of 14 hours. And obviously emergency repairs remain a priority for the service. Likewise, performance in non-emergency repairs has shown an improvement. It remains out with the performance target of 8 days in the west of the county due to the impact, in fact, really across Caithness, to be honest, due to the impact of COVID. And there is likely to still be an ongoing impact on that performance because we are still struggling to get materials. And again, it goes without saying that the service as a whole is working hard to reduce those delays. Tenancy management, the figures are there for you. Apologies for the narrative in 6.3. I took some leave and I think there's been some confusion about who should have contributed to this report. So the narrative isn't complete. I didn't notice it until very late on. All I can really say on these figures is that the relet times continue to be affected by hard to let properties. As usual, we're working hard at it. We still have choice-based lettings. That's up for discussion at the moment. And there are lots of conversations going on behind the scenes to try and improve that performance. Rent arrears. We've got a lot of tenants that are experiencing difficulty paying the rent, and we can't get away from that. Figures are up slightly, and I don't think that's going to change for the remainder of 2021. We will continue to work very hard at it, though. Homelessness, downward trend continues across Q2 for Caithness. I would expect over the next couple of months, of course, we'll see a bit of an increase as we head towards the festive period, but we're holding it at fairly low levels, mainly because we have some access to stock, which means that sometimes homeless presentations and time in temporary units isn't necessary in Caithness, so it's quite an unusual picture. And that is it, members. That's your housing report for that period, for that 5-month period. Happy to take any questions.
As well, well done, good report indeed, as usual. Members, any questions? Councillor Rossi.
Margaret, I'm going to start with an apology because I only just, when you mentioned the email, I only saw an email with referring me to download a document for a report just now. So I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. Just a couple of things that cropped up in your verbal report when you speak about choice-based lettings. What can you expand on that when you come back? Just what are we going to reopen the debate publicly? Just interested to understand more about that. I was wondering. I mean, it's good news on homelessness, but you know, when you make a comment about rent arrears, you can only imagine the difficulties that people have, and I just wonder. Do we need to do anything in terms of PR to reassure people that they've got to engage with, you know, council officers to avoid these circumstances? I don't know. Just good, always good to get your thoughts on that, Margaret. So look, what I will do is I'll read through the entire report, and if I need to come back to you, I will. But just interested to get your thoughts on those things, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you. Choice-based, I don't think it's a secret any longer that I feel that for the Highland Council, the choice-based letting initiative has run its course. But it is a decision that will have to be taken with all the HHR partners. And I know that our registered social landlord partners are fairly happy with choice-based. So it's a conversation which has started and it continues. And I personally feel the volume of relets that the Highland Council have mean we operate in a different model almost to the registered social landlords who have much smaller turnover, which gives us greater challenges. But as I say, that conversation is not for this forum. It has started. There will be consultation with our tenants, I would imagine, if that's what we decide to do. But we've had it for about 3 years now, you know, so we've given it a fair go, and there still remains a tremendous amount of churn in the Caithness social housing market. And my personal opinion is that choice-based lettings is playing a part in that. So the conversation has started, and it won't be a decision that's taken without consultation with tenants, just as all other major decisions are taken in consultation. Rent arrears, tenant participation team are excellent in their publications and in their meetings with tenants and reinforcing the need for people to continue to speak to housing officers. You know, it's just people are struggling. There's no question or doubt about that. But I'm not unduly worried, to be honest. You know, I'm really not. Things have changed through the pandemic. We're doing less home visits. We're doing less face-to-face interviews, and we're still managing, I would argue, to control our rent arrears. So we just have to keep plugging away at it. We have to make sure that phones are always answered and doors are always opened, and that people know that they can speak to us. There's very few problems we can't solve if we have engagement from our tenants. So yeah, absolutely. And I would ask you to take every opportunity you can to pass that word round too. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, Carol. Any more questions or comments, members, for Margaret? Hey, Margaret, I do enjoy the tenant participation group meetings, Margaret, which I've been attending. They're very good.
Good.
I think they're going to try a non-virtual one this weekend. I think they're going to try somewhere around. So that's good to get everybody back around the table again, and there'll be more of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are very good. They're really good. Good job. So members, any more questions for Margaret? Are you there? Or comments? Oh, I think you've done very well, Margaret. There's no more hands showing on my screen here, so
that's
Margaret?
an easy committee for me today. Thank you for that.
Very good, and thank you very much indeed, Margaret, once again.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank
members.
you.
Sorry,
Okay,
Raymond.
members. Oh, there's Raymond. Raymond's just come back in.
Yep.
You in there, Raymond?
Yeah. Listen, I know that this is the last agenda item today, and I have been coming and going like nothing on earth, but I'm just back just to let folks know. And I just wanted to say thanks to Willie for holding the fort. It's been a very, very unusual and extraordinary morning for me. So thanks, Willie. You've been an absolute star. And maybe they got the wrong person in the chair this morning, given your performance today. But listen, thanks, Willie, very much, and for holding the fort together. It's good to know that councillors can support each other through tough times, even though the public don't see that. But maybe sometimes they need to have a wee reflection on the fact that councillors are real people. And we are dealing with real issues in our lives, as well as trying to make it a better place for them in Caithness, and we're doing it at this meeting. And I think that they saw that support network in play today. So hats off to you, Willie. Thanks very much. You were a good friend today.
Thank you very much indeed. Carl, would you like to?
Well, I just didn't want you to wrap the meeting up because one or two councillors they've got intend to take a motion forward.
Yes.
Are you aware of that? Sorry, I just didn't want you to forget about that. So thanks.
No, I really did forget about it with things, but not to worry. But let's have it. Shall we go into that right now?
Yes, I don't know whether Struan's still on board. Struan, can you hear me? If not, I'll be happy to present it myself.
I'm still on board, Carl. I've had to change device because my laptop's not working.
Okay.
So I'm the voice from the behind, if that's okay.
Struan, do you want to present the motion?
No problem at all, Carl. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So members, I'd like to lodge the motion in the following terms. I think members will be broadly aware that councillors have committed to undertake significant works at the Dame St George's Park in the centre of Thurso, and to that end, officers did go out and ask potential contractors for quotations to get this work done. Unfortunately, the budget that was allocated a number of months ago, which was £60,000, seems to fall significantly short on what's going to be required to actually undertake the work. So today I will be asking for approval and signed by all Thurso North West Caithness members today that £15,000 of budget reallocation will be made, and this will be coming from the ward's COVID-19 pot and, if necessary, from the ward discretionary budget. So that's the motion that I'd like to move, Carl, in the following terms. I believe I have added it in the chat and it was available by email, but it might be worth the clerk reading it out verbatim, so I've definitely got it right, and I would be looking for a seconder.
I've got a seconder for Struan's motion.
Yeah. Just to confirm, I'm quite more than happy to second that, Willie. Thank you.
Thank you, members. And there's no amendment to that motion, so we take it the motion is carried, members. Carried.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well done. Well done. Thank you very much, members. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for being here today with us and all the presenters. Thank you, Mark, for joining us, Helen, and Anne McCrae, our organiser. Thank you very much for keeping us on the IT correct. Raymond, thank you for your comments, and we wish you good news throughout the day. And I'm sure everything will go Okay, you are the new chair of the Caithness Area Committee, and thank you, everybody. So look forward to joining us again sometime. Enjoy whatever the rest of the day you have and the rest of the meetings that come forward.